Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU podcast. I'm Andre Hagberdian. With me, as always, is Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
Great Labor Day weekend. So I'm here on a Monday and getting to record a podcast with you, man. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good too. It has been a great Labor Day weekend. Nice to relax and chill on this Labor Day after a lot of stuff going on this weekend with sports and stuff. The Aztecs played Saturday night against Idaho State. It was a late one. Started at 7:30. They got the victory 36-28. Obviously, left a lot to be desired in terms of quality of play. You know, they're 34.5-point favorites and only won by 8. Brady Hoke obviously talked about in the postgame that they didn't play well in all 3 phases, and they have a lot to clean up. And coming up next are 2 Pac-12 teams, right, UCLA and Oregon State, that are massive differences in talent level than the 2 teams that they just played, especially the latest team that they just played. So let's get to our grades. Last week we started doing our grades in the podcast form. Let's start with the offense and quarterback. How would you rate Jalen Mayden's evening, I should say?
Yeah, I think it's a tough way to be able to grade him, because I think that there was a lot that could have been made his performance a lot better. There were passes where he had receivers open that he missed them. The flip side of it is he did have a record-setting performance with the most running yards of any quarterback in San Diego State history. So I think that's really good and positive. And, the truth of the matter is, whether his big plays come from the ground or through the air, he needs to have big plays. And, being able to have that long run, how much different would everyone's idea of what happened on Saturday be if that long run had been a long pass? You know what I mean? And everyone would be like, yeah, oh, that was such a great, that was a middle performance, and that was okay. So I'm going to give him a C. I think the turnover that he had was unexcusable. He held on to the ball way too long. He allowed a 3-man rush to get to him that was blocked really well, and just didn't step up and help out and roll out and just try to buy the time in a positive manner. So I thought it was a middling performance. I don't think you can turn over the ball. I also think that when you have the opportunity, which they did in the third quarter, to put Idaho State away, they weren't able to do that, and I think that falls on Mayden. At the same time, a lot of quarterbacks who have 80 yards passing don't have 140 yards rushing, and a 220-yard performance isn't horrible, which is why I would give him the pedestrian grade.
I was going to go B-, but for many of the same reasons that you described. Another game without an interception. You mentioned the fumble. He did hold on to that a little too long. But the big runs, not just the designed runs that scored touchdowns, but the couple plays that passing plays broke down and he rushed for first downs. One was a 21-yarder. One was, I think, about 10 or 12. So those were plays that he made with his legs that weren't, called design runs. But yeah, there were some throws that he had guys open and he, threw it into the ground 3 yards in front of the receiver. Did not look comfortable throwing past, 5 yards downfield. He got hit on his hand, on his left hand during that fumble. He was looked at by the trainers. I couldn't tell. And then he had a bandage on it in the third quarter. I don't know if it was maybe got scraped on a helmet or when he fell down or if it was a bone bruise or what, but maybe that affected him. But he just didn't look comfortable throwing the ball past a screen or a short crossing route for a wide receiver. But yeah, the 56-yarder was a highlight reel play. Pretty much clinched the game, even though it got a little exciting at the end again, as it seems to always do for the Aztecs. So I gave him a B-.
Yeah, I think everything you just said is good. I think it'd be a good time to talk about Tobin Odell.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously he had one passing attempt on the Hail Mary, which, I think heads up for Maiden because I think they were going to let the clock run out. And obviously the team thought so because they all started running towards the
Yeah.
tunnel. But I think, but Maiden reached over there and said, like, one more play, like, let's do this as a way to practice, right? Because the idea is that, you might be in this position again where someone's got to come off the sidelines, who has a little stronger arm than Maiden and be able to get the ball to the end zone. And, I think the story of Tobin Odell is pretty remarkable. I think he would have been, from what I understand, he would have been the first QB in against Ohio as well. But from the Fan Fest, he was clearly the best of the young QBs. It's another one of those indications that that they are looking to 2024. Tobin Odell is right there in that mix. At post game, we asked Coach Hoke about that, and he said that Norv Turner is his uncle, that he has a football IQ that kind of runs in the
Yeah.
family. But also was very, he emphasized that Kyle Crum, Liu Amavai are right there and that they are battling and that they're doing a good job and that, they could become the backup at any moment. And so I think that young QB battle, I think, is brewing. And I thought it was pretty interesting, Tobin Odell and, right when he came out of the tunnel and they start warming up, I should say, it was definitely that pecking order, which they do on every position. And you can kind of see where they were, and Odell was second in all of those reps.
What a bummer for him to get an interception on his one Hail Mary attempt. Like that shouldn't count, right? That's not it's just unfair when you come in to get an interception when you're throwing a Hail Mary. But maybe hopefully he'll have his chances, in his college career to boost his stats from 0 for 1 with one interception.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to running backs. I feel like the running backs were, the best players on the field on Saturday night.
Okay.
A lot of different guys did a lot of different things. Jalen Armstead and Martin Blake had 58 yards rushing, so that was tied for the most, if you don't count Maiden. Obviously, Maiden had 132. Each had a short touchdown. They ran hard. Keenan Christian had 40 yards. Martin Blake was the leading receiver with 3 catches and 40 yards. We got a chance to talk to him in the post-game presser.
Killed it. Absolutely.
He did, yeah. Super, super passionate and fun, energetic. Really, you could tell why the coaches love him, his teammates love him. Cam Davis got some carries, picked up some first downs, but you could tell he's kind of like 4th in that pecking order right now anyway. But I thought they ran hard. The fumbles, Jalen Armstead with a second fumble. I'm going to go with a B+ because of that fumble. Cam Davis also had a fumble, but at least he was able to run after it and push it out of bounds. And even with Jalen Armstead's fumble, Leo Kemp was right there and had a chance to scoop it up and save the turnover, but he bobbled it. So they could have potentially, salvaged both of those fumbles, but I gave them a B+ just because they did so much. So many different guys stepped up and when, they were definitely focused on running the ball and weren't really doing much passing. I felt like they were the best players on the field other than Jalen Maiden's rushing. So I give them a B+.
Yeah, I right there. I actually am a C plus, one grade lower, because of the two turnovers. I should say one turnover, the other one went out of bounds. I just think it was when I looked to see how focused San Diego State was in the game, and that was my main key was how focused they could treat a team that they're supposed to beat by 34 points. And I think there were a lot of signs that they didn't treat them well and that Idaho State played better than anyone could have suspected or imagined. But one of the signs that I thought that SDSU's focus was not there was with the fumbles. And it's 3 in 2 games that the running backs have put the ball, and you can kind of put the ball on the ground. You can kind of excuse it because of the lack of live action, for the first game. But the second game, like I guarantee you, it was an emphasis because it was such a major thing, taking away momentum when it happened against Ohio, and it still happened twice. So I thought that they should have been much better with the ball this week, and they were actually worse. That said, I thought that the other part of it that I didn't want to give them too high of a grade is I thought that Idaho, and it was really wild too. I thought for the most part, Idaho was very, very conservative with their defense. I thought that they, for much of the game, dared San Diego State to run the ball. And I thought that, it was a really smart decision because if you're Idaho State and you're going to stack the box and you're going to go strength against strength, I'm not sure that the end result would have been much better for them than what happened. So San Diego State averages their running backs just under 5 yards a carry, which is good, but they had no really big gains. They weren't able to go and you're looking at the longest runs were 16 and 12, and they didn't have any of those big plays outside of Maiden,
Yeah.
that I think were like game changing. And I think that's exactly what Idaho State expected to happen. That if they ran a 3-3-5, and if I was going to be designing an offense against a 3-3-5, I would expect lots of blitzing. And I think that's what Lindley anticipated, which is why there were so many screen passes. It's just the blitzing didn't happen. And I thought that they were trying to basically say, okay, we're going to give you 4 yards, but we're going to believe that you're not going to be able to pick up 3rd and 2. You're not going to be able to pick up 3rd and 3 as consistently as if we didn't make you one dimensional because you couldn't pass the ball. So I thought the backs could have played a lot better, and would have given them a B because again you know they didn't underperform by any stretch of the imagination. And as you said, the receiving, especially by Martin Blake, was really good. His touchdown was, I think, spectacular, and I thought Giovanni Vicente, Nabari Visuals, who does the video for the East Village Times. I thought he captured it better than anyone, where you could see he leaves 2 guys right in the hole and then takes on, kind of 1.5 more guys, and dives for the end zone and gets that touchdown. So I thought that was, as spectacular of a 1-2 yard run as you can
Yeah.
possibly have. I thought he did really, really good. Jalen Armstead's, give him props for his touchdown dance. But I thought it left a little bit to be desired. The put your hands behind your hips or behind your head and twirl your hips. I thought he could have done a little better, but it was good stuff, man, and would have been a higher grade except for the fumbles.
The last year's game against Idaho State, San Diego State had 5 fumbles, only
Mm.
lost 2, but they put the ball on the ground 5 times. I don't remember. I couldn't find the stats on who the 3 people that fumbled but didn't lose the fumble. But I think it was probably at least a couple of those were running back. But
Yeah, no. How interesting was it that how much these games mirrored each other, just in the sense of like it was Braxton Burmeister's runs that
mhm.
were able to kind of break everything open. But San Diego State, I think, rushed for 380 last year, so there was a little bit that they left out there. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't know they did it 5 times the last time.
Yeah, on to the wide receivers. Similar as last week. Last week I gave them a C, more like an incomplete because they just weren't very involved. And this week they were even less involved. Mekhi Shaw had 2 catches for 26. Balin Brooks 1 for 7. Breon Penny 1 for 4. Josh Nicholson 1 for 1, and that was it. So, we talked about Maiden. He threw for 87 yards, and Martin Blake took up 40 of those. And so the wide receivers just weren't involved. Sometimes they were open and Maiden missed them. Sometimes they weren't open and Maiden had to go somewhere else or run the ball. I just think through 2 weeks we haven't really seen what they can do. They've not been heavily involved in the offense. I think these next 2 weeks they're going to have to be if the Aztecs have any chance of beating UCLA and Oregon State. But as of now, I'm going to stick with a C again.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that grade. I'm gonna give him a C plus, only because, just to highlight the fact that I did think that there was times when they were open and the ball was bounced or they were overthrown. I thought Breon Penny was particularly, I guess, not used and not utilized when he got open. But it's another game without Philippe Wesley, and I thought that he was their best receiver in camp. And missing that I think is big. But I thought the grade, I think you said it well. It is more of an incomplete, and at some point they're going to be challenged, and I think the challenge is going to happen this upcoming week, where I think UCLA is going to believe that they can stop San Diego State's run and their pass, and I think you're going to see some aggressiveness, and they're going to have to figure it out. Mekhi Shaw did have 2 first down, third down conversions, 4 first downs, where he found an opening and they were able to convert those and even pick up yards after the reception. So those were positive, but they just needed more. And there was that lull in the game where it just sort of seemed like they were going to figure things out. That never came, and I thought some of that was because of the wide receivers and Maiden and just not having the passing game fully moving.
All right, moving on. Tight end. How did you grade them out?
I always include, in my personal grades, I always include the tight ends as part of the offensive line. They use so many 2 tight end sets that if the offensive line, I should say, if the running backs are averaging 5 yards a carry, I think a lot of that goes to the tight ends. So I gave them a B minus. I thought that, being able to have, 2 catches for 11 yards is just unacceptable for the number of reps that those guys get. But it takes 2 to kind of try to figure that out. And I thought that, the B minus again, it's more for the running game. I thought that, it was a very good counter that Ryan Lindley did, where they were playing very, very vanilla, very, very soft. Idaho State was, that 3-3-5, only rushing 3. So he brought in 3 tight ends and said, okay, well, we're just going to run the football. And he forced them to eventually change. And I think that that's exactly what they should have done. And Logan Tanner, he got into the game as the 4th a tight end because Cam Harple had a leg injury. I don't know obviously what that was, but he was unable to go with the team when they sang the fight song, and that'll be something worth watching. But I thought Logan Tanner came in and he looks the part as we've seen throughout as the 4th tight end. He's not that far off of the other group, which I think is a real positive for the tight end group. But overall, a B minus.
I'm close to you. I have a C.
Okay.
Particularly because 2 catches for 11 yards. Mark Redmond caught the first pass of the game, 7 yards, and really didn't do much of anything. I mean, he was blocking. He played every snap. Didn't have any penalties this week. I think he had 1 or 2 last week. You would think that when the wide receivers aren't getting the ball out on the outside, that you would use the tight ends a little bit more. Throw screens to them as well. It's just that didn't materialize. So it's a little bit more of an incomplete, even though you're right, the tight ends are more involved in the blocking on the line. I think we'll talk about this when we get to the offensive line, but rushing for 303 yards is never a bad thing and shows that you did, make some nice blocks. So I'll stick with a C with them.
Okay.
And now the offensive line. I think that they're, if we were kind of joking as we were walking to the press conference, or I was, if there was ever a positional unit that could get like the worst grade, might have been the offensive line based on the penalties, really the sloppiness with a lot of the things, giving up 2 sacks after not giving up any of the prior week. I'm gonna go with a D minus. Rushing for 303 yards is obviously a good thing, and it shows the offensive line was able to block. But considering almost half of those yards came from your quarterback, and some of those were not designed runs, and then your opponent, I think rushing for 300 yards should have been, kind of a minimum for that game. Really good offense, a really good running game would have probably rushed closer to 400 or 500 yards in that game. And I think there were a lot of plays that they gave up sacks, they gave up tackles for losses against Idaho State that shouldn't just not have happened. And that's why I give them a D minus, because I think they really struggled throughout the day. Against that opponent, they should have been more dominant in what they did, and they weren't.
Yeah, I give them a D minus, maybe for a little bit different reasons for you than you did, because I personally felt that it was more on the running backs that they didn't have a bigger gain than I thought it was on the offensive line. They were getting through that first line of defense, pretty clean. But at the same time, I thought that the number of penalties that the offensive line got, I thought was really bad. I thought they had some holdings, they had a false start. Those penalties, I thought, really, like, it's on the offensive side, I thought they really killed their momentum a few times. I agree with you that you would have liked to have seen. I think some of that is, if the running backs make one guy miss, suddenly they look a whole bunch better than maybe they're going to look in the stat book. So that would be my only thing. But I thought their penalties, I thought Miles Moreau and his illegal man downfield, maybe showed his inexperience at that position. That was pretty blatant, and you're really just asked to kind of stand there, maybe go wide a little bit. But it killed a really good play design, I thought. And, I thought that was unfortunate. But mostly for the penalties, the lack of the passing game, the fact that, that they were able to at least get enough pressure with 3 people that they could, do A, B, and C. I didn't think that they were as successful in getting to the next level. So they dominated, I thought, the defensive line, but they didn't get out into the linebackers too much and get out there, which I think, again, was part of what Idaho State was going for. But there was always, it seemed like there was always at like 4 yards past the line of scrimmage, there was always 2 or 3 guys, and the line didn't get quite out there. So, penalties, a lack of that getting to the next level. I'm going to go with D minus. It feels weird to give that to a team when they get 300 yards on the ground. But I just thought that it was, after I thought an encouraging performance against Ohio, I thought it was less encouraging against Idaho State. And you don't want, if anybody was not like fully engaged and fully focused on the game, man, it's scary that it would be the offensive line, because I don't think that they have had enough success to rest on their laurels at all, and so to see some of that, I think, was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, we'll see what impact Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon's return will have this week, whether he'll be inserted in the lineup, at what position, what that'll impact the rest of the line. So yeah, we'll.
Do you have any expectations for that?
I would think that he would slide in at starting right tackle.
Okay.
And there might be a movement at right guard. Might make if Miles moves to right guard, whether or Dean Abdullah stays at right guard. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested. And I mean, it would seem to make sense that, that could happen. I don't know that I've been blown away by Moreau's play. But I also feel like he's flown under the radar a lot, which is as good of a compliment I think you can give to an offensive line sometimes. So I thought he'd been fine. It wouldn't surprise me if BCD jump back in, and it also wouldn't be surprising if he didn't come back at all. So hopefully those issues are behind him, and they can fully play the best person and not have to worry about where he's at academically.
Before we move on to the defense, Paul, did you get your energy boost from Mars Energy Cream today?
Always, bro. That's exactly it, man. If I'm being honest, I indulged a little bit at lunch. It's Labor Day, right? Had a few
Mhm.
beers with my wife and kids, and
The
had
kids didn't
nice.
have beers, right?
Thank you for catching that. They did not. I
Okay.
had the beer with them, or we had a nice lunch, and get a little tired after that, and you're coming up here and you want to be at your best. So little Marz topical cream, man. Absolutely.
Mars Energy Cream, and they are our official sponsor. If you heard our last episode, partnership with them. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. You rub it on your neck or jawline, and it gives you a boost. Doctor developed, aids in recovery, fast acting. It's got no calories. So check it out, marsenergycream.com. That's Mars spelled Marz, not like the planet Mars with an S. So check them out, Mars Energy Cream. If you want to give them a try, use the code Andre, Andre at checkout, and you'll get 15% off. So Mars Energy Cream, check it out. All right, let's start. Let's go to the defense. Defensive line. How did you grade them out?
I'll be honest. I thought this was the hardest group to grade of all of them. I'm gonna go with a C, and I'm gonna go with a C because I think that the style of play that Idaho State had, the expectations and the hope that you have for the offensive line, I think is a little bit different. A defensive line, excuse me. So what they did is they spread it out. We talked about that they eliminated the tight end from their roster, and we didn't know if that was a typo. And by how they played, it wasn't a typo, right? They were
Yeah.
very, very spread. And with teams like that, what you would like your defensive line to do is you would like to have them control the running game whenever they decided to surprise um, whenever they decided to surprise the team. And I thought for the most part, they did exactly that. I thought that they controlled the running game. They didn't allow Idaho State to run very much. Obviously 34 yards net, only on 15 attempts. So they didn't even feel like that was something that they could do. Half of those attempts, shouldn't even say more than that. 10 of those attempts were by their quarterback. And so I thought that they did really good with just allowing San Diego State to spread out in their secondary and with their linebackers. The flip side of that is you also want them to be able to get pressure with four guys. And, I thought that Cooper McDonald was able to have some good pressure. Garrett Fountain did some okay things. I thought they needed more from him. But overall, I didn't think they got their hands up enough to be able to knock down passes, the short passing game, especially over the middle. They did fourth and two late in the game. Wyatt Drager dropped on a zone blitz and dropped into coverage, and he stopped that initial slant route that they were trying to do. But I think you would like them to have batted more balls down at the line and been able to get that pressure. Truth be told, the grade might even be a little bit low because they control the running game. They even with so few guys in the box, that was just something that Idaho State couldn't do. And I think that teams that are going to be spreading them out in the future, they're going to test them a lot more than the Bengals did. But that's what you hope, is that your line is able to win that numbers game, because they're going to have 5 blockers against 4, against 5 inside. And you got to be able to make the play, which allows the rest of the defense to play honest, or to play, spread out. So overall, I thought it was decent. And especially going back to the conversation about expectations of where you're hoping the line is.
I agree with a C. This is a tough game to gauge that because of so few rushes and such quick passing. I thought they got their hands up on some plays, but you're right. That's when the quarterback is getting rid of the ball quickly, you almost have to be more prone and more focused on getting your hands up, because you're not going to have time to get to the quarterback. Even if you beat your guy like immediately, the quarterback is going to get rid of the ball. So I think Keon Mitchell had 2 nice plays back to back. Didn't have anything to show for it, because the first one he kind of whiffed on the sack, and the quarterback threw the ball away. And the next one he got the sack on a great move inside, but it was negated due to a face mask penalty. So he doesn't get anything to show for it. But he showed some of the things we saw at fall camp, that he could beat. As a walk-on, he could be a guy that could add some of that pass rush that they're missing from last year's players that departed. Tupu had some nice plays for the second straight week, but I think they'll probably want more from him, more consistency. Some good things, some not so good things, but overall, I think a C is a fair assessment on their performance.
I was going to agree. I would say the one other thing I would add about Tupu is, as as Gio's highlights, our EVT's highlights clearly show, I think he should have gotten a sack, just for the record.
Yeah, that's true. I think they gave it to Garrett Fountain, right?
Garrett Fountain deserved one as well. I don't know about the one with Cody Moon, to be honest with you. That one I don't have the memory. But Garrett Fountain, I absolutely remember him also. It was like,
yeah,
people ran past him and the quarterback stepped up into the pocket, and Garrett Fountain brought him down. So I know that one was legit. But there was one where I thought that, or at least a tackle for loss, if you're saying that he was running, but Tupu got to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah.
So you mentioned it's not in the stats. It didn't give him the stats, but he definitely was the one who had that.
All right, moving on to linebackers. Where are you at with them?
I'm going to give him a D-. I thought that off of their, great performance against Ohio, I just thought that they didn't impact the game in the same way as they did. I thought Cooper McDonald was, again, very, very good. I think as far as trying to replace some of that pass rush that Jonah Tavai had a year ago, or Caden McDonald. I'm sorry, Caden McDonald, and I think that he's shown he's going to be that person. However, I think that offenses are going to start queuing on him a lot. But even that, I still thought that he played a really nice game and was active. The strength of Idaho State's offense was in the middle of the field. And while, they spread the Aztecs out a whole bunch, I just didn't think the linebackers really got into the game enough. And they just need more out of that group. I liked the way that, I don't know if I liked is the right phrase, but I thought it's interesting, for all that we've heard about Brady Anderson leading up to the season. He hasn't been playing when they do substitutions. Bai Kaho is the main sub at both linebackers, both the Will and the Mike. Trey White has gotten in, and he plays looks like every third possession. And is active and is doing things, figuring out how to play. But you just didn't see that very many of those timely blitzes where they're able to get them off of the field. They picked up long third downs, they picked up short third downs, and a lot of that again was to the middle of the field. And it's like, well, if you're not getting to the quarterback, like, are you getting your hands up and knocking the ball down? Are you, what are you doing to stop that? And I didn't think that they showed as well as they could, and as much as they need them to be a better. They need them to be better because I think a lot of things hinge on that unit.
I agree. I gave him a C minus, but for most of the same reasons. I think you didn't see a lot of those splash plays
Mm-hmm.
that we saw the week before. They did, whiff on some tackles as well with
Yeah.
the quarterback and with some receivers, short receivers. Yeah, for a group that has become kind of maybe their best group in terms of like talent level and consistency, like you want more from them,
Yeah.
especially with a defensive line that's still trying to figure out the rotations and who's going to be their main guys at whatever they're trying to do. So it was a disappointing performance from the overall linebacking group because you would think that this would be a game that they would be able to thrive considering the opponent. But I wonder, given how little they knew about what the offense was doing, that
Yeah.
the game plan was more to kind of sit back and read and react instead of be aggressive. And I think
That's a good point.
the linebackers are most affected by that from the defensive unit because they're the ones that are usually part of the attack, part of the aggression, if and when the defense coordinator calls for that. So, all right, cornerbacks. We had Des Malone, Noah Tumblin got a start. Chris Johnson and Dallas Branch played sparingly,
Hmm.
but they got in there. I gave them a B. Des Malone and Tumblin had interceptions. Des Malone almost had a second one. They didn't get a ton of catches on the outside. Obviously, the offense, Idaho State's offense was more, as you mentioned in your article, very a lot over the middle in the slot. I feel like the corners did well, but there were some plays. There's to Noah Tumblin dropped another interception that he could have had a second one. Des Malone's first one that got overturned, it's because he bobbled it, or else that should have been another interception. And he said that
Yeah.
after the game. There was they have the overall defense has 6 interceptions in 2 games, but he felt like they probably should have 10, 11, 12 based on
Hmm.
some of the ones. And he had his one that got overturned. I don't think that they were necessarily tested a ton, but when they were up to the challenge. So I gave him a B.
Yeah, I give him an A minus. I thought that the cornerbacks were excellent. You miss interceptions like you say, but those still go down as PBUs. And I thought that they didn't really look outside anywhere near as much as they looked inside. I thought that while they didn't give the ball to their running backs, their running game was the bubble screens. And I thought there was, when Tumblin and Malone were in the game, I thought that they handled those really, really well. That there was a couple where, they beat the blocks and they got in there and they stopped it. I didn't think Johnson did that quite as well. I don't recall Malone facing that. I beg your pardon. Remember Branch facing that. Um, I was surprised. I did not anticipate that the starters would get as many reps as they did. It seems like there's always been this kind of mixed messages, um, where we've heard that Sumler does not want to rotate his corners. He wants to play the best players. And yet they're always rotating. And then the mixed message, of course, is that Kurt Maddox wants the rotation because the guys are going to graduate. And then where are you left with experience
Yeah.
wise? Um, so I thought the whole first half, unless I missed something, which is, easy to do. I don't think any cornerback other than the starters played, the entire first half. And then, you saw, in the second half, Johnson came in for Tumblin and then Branch came in, for Malone. And, I still thought that they played very, very well. I thought they didn't even really look to Malone's side. Early, I thought they played kind of just um, the short side of the field. I think they tried to simplify it for their QBs. But I thought that they did, what you would want them to do, and they're never going to be perfect.
Moving on to safety. You can go first on this one. What did you have them graded at?
I had them as a D minus. I did not think that the safety play was very good. We'll see
B
what
as in David or B as in boy?
G is in David.
Okay.
I did not think that you give up 309 yards passing, and again it's on 63, but 30 completions. A lot of those are their running plays, those quick things and stuff like that. So it's a little bit misleading. But nonetheless, I thought that they had a lot of opportunities in the middle of the field. And I think the grade is a whole bunch higher if they don't allow those two touchdowns before either half ended. And they were inexcusable. I mean, they just as Des Malone, I think, as trying to be as diplomatic as possible. I thought he was very encouraging about where he thinks the defense is, where the secondary is in particular. He said, like, we fell asleep, and that's exactly what it looked like. It almost looked like
Yeah.
they forgot that the clock stops after every first down or what it was. But I mean, they just looked like they weren't there. Um, and so those mistakes I think were huge. They allowed them to have life when they were down by 16. Eric Butler, he just it's what we saw in practice. He has trouble at this stage in his career with very quick receivers, and he was covering a 5'8" guy who looked like he was going to go out wide and kind of come in behind, and Butler tried to think he was going that way, and then he did a double move and came inside and was wide open. And again, it's not that's going to happen. But that was a big play, and then the next play, they go for two, and Devon Celestine comes in unblocked,
Yeah.
whiffs on getting the sack, and they do a crossing route where the Idaho State receiver had gotten 5 steps from Sedarius Barfield. So I just thought it wasn't great in the middle of the field. You know, Only because it's a podcast and you have to talk about things, but I still just wonder. I think Kurt Maddox has a beat on his defense and doesn't need my suggestions at all. But I just wonder, like would they be better served with bringing a guy like Dallas Branch off the off the bench, and in those passing downs that are sure passing downs, putting that kind of NFL prototypical, at least seemingly, quick hips, physical, nickel kind of corner to cover those guys. It seemed like they're still trying to figure out exactly what they want to do with Aztec, as much as high as they are in Marcus Ratcliffe. And, maybe at post game, I asked Coach Hoke about that and the passes in the middle of the field. And he was like very demonstrative that, their rotation was not because of play, that was just what they wanted to do. But, they played 3 different Aztecs. Max Garrison, who could play that position, played special teams and at least was on the field. I don't know. They just seem like they were trying different things still, and it's the second week in a row that the offense knew where they wanted to attack, and they wanted to attack in the middle of the field, and they wanted to. That was where they would. I mean, just locking in. Like this is what we're going to do, and I think it's important that they sure it up. Coach Hope said they can do some things differently with the schemes. There's some stuff they haven't done yet that they're depending on the opponent going to do. But I was watching San Jose State and Oregon State, and Oregon State's QB, who obviously was one of the top recruits in the country years ago for Clemson, his arm strength and the ability to throw the ball after holding it for a very long period of time is a scary proposition for how the Warrior safeties have covered. That said, I thought Barfield has continued to come up with the big plays. He had another interception, and I thought he's been strong. It's an incredibly challenging task that they ask these hybrid safeties to do, which is to cover like a corner, but also to be able to come up and hit like the linebackers. And I'm not 100% sure that they've been up to the task yet in 2023.
We heard a lot in fall camp from the coaches about blitzing their safeties more and more. And we've seen them blitz. We just haven't seen them be as successful at it. So curious if that'll improve. But I give him a C-, a little bit better than you, specifically because despite everything you said about the mistakes and the touchdowns, they threw the ball 63 times. And they only ended up with 309 yards. They completed less than 50% of their passes. Covering the slot is one of the most difficult things to do, I think, in football. There's a reason why Rondé Barber just got inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because he pretty much revolutionized the nickel slot corner back position. Before then, that wasn't something that became a hot and heavy thing that he did, and he kind of excelled at it, which is why he's in the Hall of Fame now. But I thought, giving up less than 50% completions, only 309 yards. Jordan Cook's yards per pass attempt were actually less than Jalen Mayden's on Saturday night, and Jalen Mayden only threw for 87 yards. It was like 4.4 to 4.8. Now Hunter Hayes had better numbers because he came in and he was able to throw some bigger plays. I think the first or second pass he threw was a 39-yard play to Cheaton James down the left sideline. So he did play a little bit better than Jordan Cook. But overall, I do think they need to play better, and they will have to against UCLA and Oregon State. But considering that this team showed up and strictly was throwing the ball, 85% of the time, the statistics don't look as bad. Yeah, there's a lot to improve on. They were put in a position where they were gonna throw into the slot a lot, and they made some plays and they gave up some plays, and we'll see what happens next week.
It's funny when you have to justify a C.
Yeah.
It's an area that when San Diego State is great, where in that position, their defense is great. And so there's a lot hinging on it. And, when they had Trenton Thompson in 2021, who was able to step in for Tariq Thompson, who played that position, I would argue, better than anybody in the Rocky Long, Brady Hoke era. It just gives that, it just makes them incredibly skilled on defense, and they need somebody to play to that level, whether that's Celestine or Barfield, most likely, and they need somebody to in that cover role to be able to do it. But it's 2 weeks in a row where that has been the case, and it's always going to be the case. As you say, it's the hardest thing to do defensively in football. Offensive coordinators know that too. But the grade, I think, fell mostly because of the touchdowns. Like they were inexcusable in the middle of the field. And without those touchdowns, I think everything that you say makes them do a good job. But those were just, I thought, two unforgivable touchdowns in the course of the game. And it allowed Idaho State to hang around. And, towards the end, especially, I think they started to believe that the upset was possible.
Yeah, you've got the pass interferences as well that aided some of those scores, but they got a little lucky too. The fourth down play in the second quarter, I think the nicest throw of the entire game was Jordan Cook throw to Alfred Jordan down the middle of the field. Jordan dove, caught the ball, and then bobbled it. That's all the fourth down. See, if he holds on to that ball, he was wide open too.
Right.
Holds on to the ball, they've got a first and goal at the 6 yard line.
Yeah, that's
Instead, they
good.
get 0 points. So
Yep.
that was a big play as well in the second quarter. All right, let's move on to the special teams. Let's split it up two ways. Let's do one way with the kicking, like kicking, punting, kickoffs, and then the
Okay.
second part will be like the returns and the coverage teams. So kicking, punting, I gave them a B. Jack Browning made both field goals. Obviously, he missed one last week, so he didn't miss any this week. But his punting was uncharacteristically strange. Like his first two punts came off his foot, like really unlike how all his other punts always come off his foot. It didn't have that bump, that boom that we're so used to seeing. Even Coach Hoke mentioned it. We didn't get I don't know if there's a reason for it, if it was, you know, weather related or what, but he didn't seem to have the same boom in his punts that he's had for the last 14 games or whatever he's been the kicker. So I give him a B.
I think that's right. I give him a C. Maybe I'm just missing school on Labor Day or something like that when I'm giving low grades. But I thought that, he had a 40. It's funny to talk about him not doing well, and he had, I think, a 43-yard average. But I thought a lot of that,
Yeah.
he got a lot of good bounces, which is great. I mean, that's going to happen. I thought that the difference when you watch a professional game and a college game, I think is seen most with the QB play, and I think it's most seen with the punters. I mean, the sound and the spiral of the ball and how the ball turns over every single time, and Browning as a punter has always been closer to that role, looking more like a professional than a college player, but I thought he looked like more of a college player. I thought that it's just a big part of their game, being able to pin teams back, that they missed it. I thought they missed the opportunity to do that. And they only pinned one back inside of the 20. And again, it's grading on a curve, and the expectation is that this is the best special teams player in the conference, maybe on the West Coast, and you need more out of it than what they got. So maybe objectively, I think your B is probably right. The fact that this is Jack Browning, I gave him a C because I think he just needs to be better.
And then last, the kickoff returns, punt coverage returns. I gave him a B minus. Martin Blake's return after the safety, a 35-yard return, really set them up. They got a personal foul penalty at the end of that when they got the ball at the 20. They only had to go 27 yards. That helped. They didn't turn the ball over. They caught all the punts, all the kickoffs. That's positive. But at the end of the half, after they got a field goal to make it 20-6, they gave up a good return with a minute and a half left, and that kind of helped Idaho State go down and get a quick touchdown to at the end of the half. So I thought that was a breakdown. I don't think they necessarily played poorly, but B minus seems like a fair assessment there.
Yeah. I am an A minus. I thought if there was a place where Idaho State might try to do something weird, it could happen on the kicks. And there was just there was no I guess stress seemingly from Idaho State on San Diego State. I thought it was, and as I highlighted in the article that I wrote, I thought you could see how many different ways they were trying to take advantage of the fact that they had such an advantage in the kicking game. And I think it's really smart because watched a lot of Mountain West football this weekend, and I think the thing that stands out is there's not a lot of Jack Brownings at a lot of these other teams, and I think they're going to have opportunities, whether that's in the punt game, return game, or in the kickoff return game. And I like the way that they attempted to put people in the game who had a little bit more explosiveness. So they took advantage of the fact that they have a big running back and kind of used him in a tight end role as a blocker. But also, if they kicked it short and this is Jalen Armstead, they could do something with it. Keenan Christian did have one opportunity that he let slip away to return a kick. So they're still trying to unlock that. They're catching the ball, and on punts, I think that's the biggest thing. I do wonder if Mekhi Shaw has the explosiveness to really, bring something back and really make it. But again, if their goal is, it seemed like, especially with putting Des Malone back there as well, their attempt and their try was to make sure that they couldn't squib it, they couldn't do some short stuff, they just were going to be okay no matter what. And then, of course, they got a safety, which
That's right. I forgot to mention that.
how does the game kind of look at the end if they're only up by 6 as opposed to being up by 8 um, or 7 because they would have went for 1, I guess, on the front. It's just it's a little different of a game, and so I thought that was good, and so I gave them that, and it's just again it's the highlight. I think Doug Deacon does a really really good job, and I don't know that the coaches overtures about treating everybody the same and focusing and all of that was necessarily listened to. But when when one of your coordinators is trying all these new things and is trying to figure out exactly how to counter everything that they could possibly see, I think for at least for those players who are out on special teams, it gives them that buy-in of how they're supposed to be. I didn't think the game was that dissimilar from the game last year, all except in the final score, of course, which I think mostly is due to what took place in the drives right before the half. I think that the game kind of went very similar, except for those 2 drives. And San Diego State's got a lot in front of them. We'll talk about UCLA later in the week, but I it's a winnable game. They definitely should not be the favorites by any stretch, and they're going to have to play better than they've played to date. But it should be pretty exciting.
Talking about that safety, right? It was a high snap that went over the punter's head and into the end zone. Like, for Aztec fans, that should at least signify how important a good long snapper is. And San Diego State has one of the best ones in the country, Ryan Wintermeyer. We got a little bit of flack for putting him, I think, 6th in our rankings preseason. Don't want to jinx it here with him, but I don't think he's had a bad snap at all over his 2 years now as a snapper, 2+ years. So I really believe that there's a lot of importance there because you only really hear about them when they have a bad snap or they commit a penalty. But hey, every time they snap that ball and it's perfect into the punter's hands, that's a good play, and that shouldn't be discounted for sure.
No, completely. And I mean, to your point, after they did that, they get 2 points. San Diego State got 2 points for the safety, but then they have to kick off. And when they kicked off, San Diego State got the ball
27.
Their own, right? Their own 27. I mean, not their own 27. They got it on.
No.
Right.
Yeah, because that was the one Martin Blake ran it back, I think, 35 yards to the 42. Right. And then one of the guys pushed to Jalen Armstead after the ball was dead for a 15-yard late hit. So they started at the Idaho State 27.
And what was the final result of that?
It was a touchdown.
Right. So I mean
Martin Blake's touchdown.
That's a 9-point swing that takes place because of that, and all because the long snapper wasn't able to do his job, which to this point, as you say, Ryan Wintermeyer has been able to do and do really really well, and just because San Diego State has had such a run of good long snappers to where this hasn't been an issue for a long time. It doesn't need to be missed, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. All right, that's our grades for the Idaho State game. Let us know in the comments or on social media if you agree, disagree, with any of our grades. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, on the game, and specifically the different positional groups on a team. We, as Paul mentioned, we'll be back later this week with another episode with the UCLA preview. So stay tuned for that. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share on all your favorite platforms. And we will talk to you guys soon. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.